Okay folks, so we're going to look at the final author in the series of videos for the set text for Eduqas, Romans in the Countryside. Today we're going to look at Virgil, a self-sufficient farm, or a self-sufficient farmer. Okay, so Virgil's writing a poem called the Georgics, and it's all about farming. And he's actually given advice on how to farm, and he goes on a tangent, he goes off on one about somebody who is a self-sufficient farmer, like an ideal of somebody who cultivates their own kind of small holding, their own plot of land, not to make a living more broadly, but just to feed themselves. So if you want to have a look at the do now task and do the translation, pause the video now, and then as usual I'll go through the answers in just a sec. Okay folks, so lilia, we know our lilies, papaver, our poppy, primus vere, so this is a seasonal thing. Vere is spring, it means green, so at the start of the green, at the start of spring. Autunno, you probably guessed, is autumn. Aestatem is actually summer, okay. Flores are flowers, and hiems is winter. So we're getting a sense of seasons coming through because he's growing his own crops to live on, okay. So, namque sab oibeliae meminimi toribis arcis. So I certainly remember miminime beneath the towers of the citadel of Tarentum, okay, sub toribus arcis. So this is like a suburb almost, you know, it's near a citadel, it's not a broad open plain. Qua niger umecta flauentia colca galaisus. So where the dark Galaisus waters the yellow crops. Coricium vidisse senem, qui pauca relicti. I saw an old Cilician or Cilician, to whom belonged a few acres. Qui, to whom, pauca relicti, a few acres. Relicti is like were left, so belonged in the sense that he's inherited him. Jugera ruris erant, of abandoned land, which was neither productive for oxen, nor, so we've got nec, neither, nec, nor. Fertilias illa juvencis, nec pecoria opportuna seges, nec commoda baco. So, neither productive for oxen, nor decent for grazing for flocks, nor any use for vines, commoda baco. So baco is Bacchus, so growing vines for wine. And I've put these images on from the prescription so that you can see the two activities that people would expect of a bigger farm. Okay, so he's saying it's a really, really small kind of enterprise. And it's really similar to Ovid when we were looking at a rustic festival and we were looking at the Terminalia and this small like farming family getting together. So it's something much more humble. Hic rarum tamen indumis olus albaque circum lilia. So he, however, by planting the occasional cabbage in the brambles and white lilies all around, so albaque lilia is white lilies, and verbenas, so like a variety of plants, and spindly poppies, so papaver we know is poppy, regum aequabat, equalled in his mind, so animis is in his mind or in his spirit, opes, the wealth, regum, of kings, and returning, revertens, nocte, at night, home is domum. He would load on erabat, so if something's onerous, it's a heavy burden. On erabat, he would load or he would burden his mensas, his tables, dapibus inemptis, with an unbought feast. So it's giving this impression, the way Virgil describes it, of plenty and the idea of abundance. But it's all relative, isn't it? Because he thinks he's equal to a king just because he can fill his own table with a meal. So he's contrasting like the wealth that urban citizens would expect with the real wealth that country people experience. Okay. Primus vere rosam. So here we've got this time of year coming in. So he was the first in spring, vere, to gather roses, and carpere is to pick or to gather. We've got rosam. Atque autumno, and in autumn, the first to gather apples. Carpere pomma. Et cum tristis iems, etiam num frigore saxa, and when gloomy winter was still cracking rocks with frost, So frigore saxa, rocks are saxa, frigore is cold, and rumpere, I think here is cracking. Et glacie cursus franere aquarum, and holding back the flowing stream. So franere is holding back, flowing streams, cursus aquarum, glacie, with ice, like glacier. Ile comam mollis iam tondeba hiecanthi. He was already cutting the threads of the delicate crocus. Aestatem increpitan seram zephyrosque morantes, railing at the lateness of summer and the sluggish west winds. Okay, so aestatem is summer, the west winds are zephyrosque. So it's him making the most of everything seasonally. So it's a very wholesome image of this guy who is self-sufficient. Ergo apibus fetis idem atque examine multo. So ergo, he was the first again to be rich in breeding bees. Apibus is bees. Atque examine multo, and a large swarm. And to extract foaming honey from the pressed combs. So abundare gives us abundance. Cogere is to force. So here it's going to be to extract. Abundare is to be rich. So the lines have run over because we've got poetic word order as well. So the first to be rich, and spumantia cogere pressis, and to force from the pressed chromes foaming honey. Mela favis, so mela is our honey. Ili tiliae atque uberrima pinus. So to him belonged, tiliae I think are our lime trees, and uberrima, the most prolific, like Uber in German, pines. However many, quoque, fruits a fertile tree had dressed itself in its first blossom, induerat, it always bore the same amount of ripe fruit in autumn. So totidem autumno matura tenebat. So he's got it down to a fine art. It's all really steady, and he's very self-sufficient. And he's very, very detailed. And this is because Virgil's poem overall is about farming and the detail of farming and the nature of it. He's really making it an expert subject. So he's very knowledgeable in a way that Horace probably isn't. If you read Horace's image of the countryside, it's very idealised. And he gives a couple of varieties of plants, but he really talks about just laying around and enjoying it, whereas Virgil's talking about building a very simple life within it, and he speaks with a kind of expert voice on these things. So the key themes you could look at here, ergo rapibus fetis, so he was the first again to be rich in breeding bees. So abundare should be on here, it's just because it's on the next line. This idea of what wealth is. So if you had an essay question on like wealth and prosperity, you could talk about Cicero saying that people in the countryside feel wealthy because they're happy with what they've got. They don't covet other people's belongings the way that his client Roscius is being accused of doing. You could talk about the unbought feast that this guy has in a self-sufficient farmer. You could also talk about the humble origins. So nec pecore opportuna seges, nec commoda bacco. It's not like fit for large-scale farming. And you could really compare this to the family in Ovid's Terminaria, when he's talking about that festival and how everybody gets together and offers really humble offerings to the god Terminus. So they try to offer a lamb, but they might have to offer a really young piglet depending on what's available at the time. So the idea of humble origins, humble beginnings, we see in Cicero and Horace as well. Regum aequebat opes animis, so in his mind he was equal to the wealth of kings. So this contrast of the wealth of the city and the frugality of the countryside could be another one. Like we could be thinking about the way that Cincinnatus is praised for wiping the grime off his skin, putting a toga on and doing his duty, but then promptly going back to his farm and not striving to be a politician afterwards. Okay, so just a few things to leave you with. This is just a homework slide I already had the first time I taught this, but it gives us some short answer questions that I've taken from the Eduqas supporting materials. So these are the kinds of things you can use to help deepen your knowledge of the text, so that if you have it popped in front of you in an exam, you're not scrambling to the back and looking at that glossary. At the bottom of the slide, I've also put another link to Book 5, Stage 35, Russ, and this is like Life in the Countryside. It's a chapter in the Cambridge Latin textbooks that has stories that are relevant to this theme, and it also has some good background on life in the countryside written in English in the culture section. So best of luck with your revision, and I hope this helps. Don't forget to keep going back to the knowledge organisers and just building up your knowledge author by author and theme by theme.